This is something I know our listeners don't have to worry about when our podcast is on, but it's napping. We talked about it before.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring it up, we were at home groups yesterday,
right?
And your daughter, expert napper, can just fall asleep on the couch like it's nothing.
Conked out. Yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm impressed. I'm similar where I can sleep on a dime, whether I'm on a plane or if I'm at like a family gathering or something. It could be Thanksgiving, people are over. I'll still just take the afternoon nap on the couch, and it's like there's something to that man, it's good to be able to do.
It's a little bit more difficult. I've gotten better about being able to sleep on a plane, because it's a control thing.
Yeah.
It's like it's moving, and I'm like, do I trust this? And I finally get to the point where I'm like, whether I'm awake or asleep, it's not going to change.
Yeah.
I think, but maybe if I were praying,
that's true. Yeah.
But it is also like I can fall asleep if someone else is driving, but it's not easy for me to. But if no one's driving, like the car's just still, I within 90 seconds or less, I can be out.
Yeah. So you were on a road trip today.
On a road trip today.
Does Jill drive smooth enough for you to sleep, or
you're trying to call us dry?
I know. Just
so we did leave at 5:30 today.
Oh, bright and early. Yeah,
bright and early. We were wheels rolling, which that's a big deal for the Mott family to be rolling that early. And we did have to stop and get gas. We knew we'd have to stop and get gas, but it was like planned. Like, hey, we'll just get gas real quick. But Phoebe, she still had her pull-up on because we just grabbed her basically out of bed.
Yeah.
And but when she says I need to go to the bathroom, it's probably best to let her use the actual bathroom.
Yeah.
So like on the way up, Jill was like, I guess I'm going to take her to the bathroom real quick. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get like 5 minutes. So boom, asleep. Then, she knocked on the window to let him. So I woke up, and then on the way back, I was like, I'm probably going to need another nap at some point in time. She's like, that's fine. Let's just drive a little bit. Let's see if Phoebe needs to stop or something to go potty. Phoebe actually went to sleep, and she was sitting there like catching flies.
Nice.
And so I was like, okay, I think I'm going to do it right now.
Power nap it
we
up.
pulled over to the side of the road. Well, not the side of the road. We went to it's craziest setup I've ever seen. Gas station, church, and like some other building.
We should see more of that.
It was all
you
together.
Don't see that often.
So I just like pulled in the gas station, went right into a church parking spot. Within 90 seconds, was out. I set my timer for 15 minutes because you don't want to nap too long.
Yeah.
Like 2.5 minutes left. I was like, and I was like,
dude,
back at it. Driving.
It's like, some people, they're getting ready for football season, do 2-a-days. You got 2 naps in the day, 2 power naps, so you could see everything Anderson had to offer. No, that's pretty good. Nap. I always appreciate a good nap. I don't nap as much as I should, but man, get a good nap changes your life.
I saw some robotic patients napping today because Lydia's interested in going to nursing.
Oh, yeah.
So we got to see they have like these little rooms, hospital rooms set up where you can go and like if something's going on. And she was like, some of these are more higher fidelity than others. This little child is our highest fidelity. She was telling about all the things he can do. And I was like, can it vomit? And she's like, yes, it can vomit. And she was like, and it can cry. And I think other things. And I was like, I didn't know.
You're like, should I follow up?
Yeah. So, because I've heard like part of the worst part of nursing is like the smell sometimes with some of the fluids. So
yeah, wow.
I don't know if they make those
simulation
fluids.
room. That'd be crazy. They probably would get a lot of people that were like, it's it's better to have your degree and fall into that. Where you're like, I'm already in here.
And I don't know if this is bad to ask.
Oh, then we should ask it.
But when you were getting your PT, I'm assuming you worked on cadavers?
Correct. Yeah.
Was that undergrad and grad or just?
Undergrad was like we had a cadaver for like anatomy class in the labs you would go through. We didn't have like a bunch for at MUSC. They had like a bajillion cadavers that we would rotate through and look at. So I think now where I went to school, it's a little bit better. But when there was still cadavers, good. But
Does CSU? Do you know if CSU?
I don't know if they do or not.
Oh yeah,
they have a PT school now, so I was like, maybe they do, but I don't know if that's just for. Because I think most PT schools kind of have to.
They were one of 2 undergrad schools that had cadavers in the state, Anderson.
Wow.
And we were trying to decide between MUSC and CSU because we heard both people say that they were cadavers at both those places.
Yeah, MUSC I can definitely vouch for, has it, but I don't know if that's just like the grad school part of it, so it doesn't count.
Right.
Kind of thing.
She was saying that they are the only school that non-medical professionals can go in and see. And she's like, let me give you some examples. Like people going to counseling, they come in and maybe look at brain structures.
Oh, wow.
She's
that's
like, we've had people taking voice come in and look at like vocal flaps and like
cool.
larynx.
Oh, yeah,
and
that's kind of cool to see
yeah.
that stuff. I might have told the story before, but first day of PT school for anatomy lab in the cadavers, had an OT standing next to me, and she just hit the floor. Like just this. You know what they say really gets a lot of people on cadavers specifically?
Eyes.
Good. Keep guessing. Body parts.
Mouth.
Hands. Really get people.
Why hands?
Like first day they kept hands covered, but I guess it's so personal. I don't know what it is, but they say hands really. I don't know. I should have looked this up, but they told us like hands really bother people sometimes, and I think they made the argument like sometimes you see like a face and it's like lifeless. I don't know. Like, but anyway, you know.
Well, Lydia's all excited, and she has told us probably since she was 8, I want to donate my body to science when I die. And I'm like, please don't. And she's like, I am going to, and you're probably going to be dead, so it won't matter.
I want to talk to her about this.
Yeah. And I was like, you know, some of those bodies, they just like put out like in a fake crime scene to like see how long it takes for certain beetles to show up and stuff. Like, that's what you want? And she's like, it won't matter to me because I'm gone. True, but yeah.
That's great. Well, you know, when I think of cadavers, I think of wisdom. I don't know about you, Michael, but that's a wisdom decision. Are you going to donate your body to science or not? What are you going to do with it? You got to make that choice.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
So, this is the concluding lesson. We've been in wisdom literature long enough. Week number 6. Let's go ahead and take it to the next level. From the hearts of the Low Country in South Carolina,
it's the Take 2 podcast, where we take theology to the next level.
Right. Wisdom, books. I know the Sunday school I did was really brief overview, kind of some review. And then when I tried to do what my goal originally was to look at how do these 3 wisdom books, maybe Wisdom Psalms too, if you want to count that, how do they fit in with the larger context of Scripture? Where do we see, you know, shout outs or these connections with other Old Testament passages? Where do we see these wisdom books in the New Testament? Because I think it is easy with everything to like just hone in and you don't see the big picture. So
do you have any stats on how often they're quoted by other books, the wisdom books?
That would have been a great stat.
Okay.
But no.
Do you want me to look it up right now?
Look it up. Okay. Let's see what happens. And while you're looking it up, I'll tell you this great quote that I came across by Bruce Waltke, Old Testament scholar. A lot of people don't necessarily love wisdom books because they don't advance the narrative, the redemptive story. It's not like we're going to the promised land, we're getting out of Egypt, or the prophets are coming because exile is here. It's kind of static. We don't get a whole lot of progress in a meaningful way that, you know, might be a criticism some will say. But Bruce Waltke, he summarizes the Psalm, really Hebrew poetry, Psalms through Song of Solomon, and he says, instead of telling us about Yahweh's redemptive acts, these books are a response to Yahweh's redemptive acts in the form of praise, asking questions, making observations, and even complaining. And I thought it was a good way to think of the wisdom books. It's like we see what God's done. How do we respond to it? A lot of that is wisdom, whether it is observation or complaining or praising. You found the stat?
I got the stat. So Psalm, you count it as a wisdom literature or not? And probably the Psalms that are quoted, probably more messianic Psalms.
For sure.
68 quotations from Psalms in the New Testament. Proverbs quoted 8 times.
Okay.
The other wisdom books, Job, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, are not directly quoted in the New Testament, but there are some of the deuterocanonical books Sirach.
That's a wisdom book, yeah.
Is that the sauce that you put on there?
Yeah.
Is not directly quoted in the New Testament, but there are some references or allusions to its teaching in the New Testament. This is what ChatGPT
No, that's
said.
big. When you read about wisdom literature, that Sirach, whatever book is... that's talked about. They're like, Paul talks about this all the time.
Yeah.
He was very familiar. You know what I mean? You've read them. I've never read that book, but that's what people make the case for certain things. That's interesting. So Jesus is not out there quoting all Ecclesiastes, what you're telling me.
No, but quoting Psalms, yeah.
But quoting a lot of the Psalms. So we won't belabor necessarily all of the review because we went through that. Maybe we can jump into, well, I'll just give the high level. When we talk about Proverbs, talk about patterns, talk about principles, that how life, you know, generally works. Ecclesiastes, framed as a paradox. This Hevel, I think a good way to think of Hevel, it's either talking about the fleetingness of life, the futility of life, or the frustrating paradoxes of life, where wicked people prosper, righteous people suffer.
Right.
That's tough. And then Job kind of looks at something similar to Ecclesiastes, but it's really calling us to trust God because he's got this providential perspective. He sees everything when what looks like a mess to us fits within his plan. And I don't know if these are in your notes, Michael, but I'll share these verses here because I think they give us a good overview of these different perspectives. I really like this little the theme I did for my presentation, but it's hard to read. Okay. So I don't know if you want to read. We'll start with Proverbs. You want to read this and it kind of shows those perspectives.
Yeah. So Proverbs 13:9 says, "The light of the righteous rejoices, but the lamp of the wicked will be put out."
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
If you my watch is talking. That you're righteous. There's light. There's rejoicing. Good things happen. But opposite, if you're wicked, there's darkness. Your lamp's put out. Presumably, bad things
Makes
happen
sense.
to you.
It's how you would expect the world to be.
That's right.
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes, Mr. Hevel himself. What's the Kohelet tell us?
It says, "In my vain life I have seen everything. There is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in his evil doing."
And
kind of opposite of what you would want to happen.
Yeah, and it's like not only is this righteous man dying, but he's dying in righteous, like doing good things, and this evil person's doing well, and they're not only do they just do well, it's like they're doing evil and doing well by it. And then I like this last one in Job because I think it really does parallel with Proverbs really well.
It says, "How often?" This is Job 21:17. "How often is it that the lamp of the wicked is put out, that their calamity comes upon them, that God distributes pains in his anger?"
I wrote down in my notes the way the NLT puts it. He basically, I'm paraphrasing even the NLT a little bit, but he says, basically saying, the light of the wicked never seems to go out. Do they even have trouble? And it's almost like, man, he's really looking closely at this idea in Proverbs and saying, that might be what it's supposed to happen, but that's not my experience.
Yeah. No, that's good. So good. Three different perspectives. I think it's good.
And then I should send you this video. It's like it's. I think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
I won't play it here, but maybe I'll send it to you, Michael. Because you have to watch it. It's this. My brother. He's in Peru with friends. He doesn't know that this guy is proposing to his girlfriends.
Yeah.
And what happens is he's like not paying attention, and he'll just end up like walking around like an idiot right in the middle here. And so like they have like their video of like their special moment. He's just like right in the middle of it, like he doesn't know what's going on. And I'm like, my brother, such a dumb guy, and I hope he's listening. I was like, it's always a good way to make fun of your brother. And my point was, let's know what's going on. We should know how things happen together because you don't want to get caught like Old Testament's totally divorced from the New Testament. That kind of thing.
Someone should have been on Brother Watch, like. Just like, hey, when this happens, someone's got to get him out of there. I've seen a video. I've seen a video where this woman was getting proposed to, and her sister they like didn't tell her on purpose.
Oh,
the caption's like, we did not tell her because we knew she would ruin it. And her husband was like on watch. So like as soon as they turn around, like you can see in the camera, the husband like comes up around her, puts his hand over her mouth, and just drags her out of the frame so that her sister and the guy proposing can have a special moment.
Sometimes you need that. So I'll show the video because he's just like there. He doesn't know, and everyone starts going like clapping. And he's like, "What?" And he's like in the middle, and that's like their video of their proposals. Like he's like right in the middle. Like he's literally in between the guy and the girl.
Should I put this? Should I put it into our? Okay,
you should. That'll be great.
All right, so right now, video of that.
Ya, siguiente. Ya, le toca.
All right, and then we'll cut back. Yeah.
All right, so for sake of time, probably what I'll do is same thing I did in the Sunday school. I started developing or looking at all these different connections in the Old Testament, but you could really spend you could look for everything.
Yeah.
It's like, some of these connections you can see everywhere. Proverbs is different than books like Deuteronomy about the law, but it's really not. They're very complementary, where Deuteronomy 6 really sounds like a lot of these Proverbs about teaching and learning and these wisdom, and you'll do well with them. And there's a lot of imagery with the tree of life. Proverbs talks a lot about the tree of life, interestingly enough, connecting. So that's like an interesting word study to do, and then obviously looking ahead to Revelation. But we will focus on Jesus and the Proverbs. And I didn't read this slide ahead of me, in front of me and Michael right now, but Jesus talks a lot in Proverbs. Like 70% of what he says are either parable, proverbs, riddles,
not
chiasms,
quoting
whatever.
a proverb, but what
Correct.
he's saying is stylized as a proverb.
No, that's a great distinction where, he's not quoting a lot of Proverbs, as you mentioned, only 8. So that's a good catch. But he's talking in this kind of genre. So it's good to be acquainted with it. He'll say things like, be wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. He'll say it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. First will be last, last will be first. A million things he's talking in these short, pithy sayings. So it's good to be aware of it. And I thought this was a really good example of a proverb. Not that
we listened to this proverb on the way up to Anderson today. It was in my daily listen.
So that's great. Is it the 26th? Or are you ahead by a couple days?
No, I'm on this dwell, and it's not doing it necessarily by the date. So Jill looked at me. She's like, this is not the proverb of the day. I'm like, because I'm doing a dwell plan. It's not synced up to the date. It's okay.
It's flex. Dwell knows what's going on. I brought up this proverb, Proverbs 26:4 and 5, because I talked about it in the Proverbs class. And it's this seemingly contradictory proverb that says, answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself. Very next verse, answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. And we talked about, wisdom. Part of wisdom is reading the room and it's context dependent. And there's a time.
I think this is perfect for parents, because there are times when you need to, your children are fools.
Yeah.
You love them. They love you most of the time. But they're fools. And some more than others.
Yes, very true.
And so you have to discern, there's a time when you're like, I'm not going to get down in the mud and argue with you, and because I'm not going to get on that level. But I will explain myself, I'll explain why, and then that's it. That's the end of the story. That's all she wrote. We're not going to argue about this. I think that's kind of the two sides of this coin of what's being.
That's really practical too, because you could over-explain everything, and guess what? In certain moments, you ain't tipping the scales. And then sometimes it's like, this is a good time to talk. What I like about this proverb, we could do this probably in many ways, but Jesus in Matthew 26 actually lives out both of these proverbs, one after another. And the context is he's just arrested. He's taken to this mock trial by the Jews, and they get these false witnesses to testify against Jesus. Verse 62 of chapter 26 says, and the high priest stood up and said, talking about the testimony these false witnesses made, you have an answer to make, Jesus? What is it that these men testify against you? But Jesus remained silent. He's like, these false testimonies, I'm not going to engage. There's no benefit here. But right after that, verse 63 keeps going, and the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. And then Jesus answers that, because that's a pretty big claim. He's probably like, this is something I should engage with. You have said so, but I tell you from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. So that was pretty cool. It's like, I'm not going to engage, then I'm going to engage. Kind of teasing that out.
Yeah, and I think he does something similar with Pilate when he's before Pilate.
That's a really good point too.
He doesn't answer him, and then he does answer him. Yeah, it's good.
And just seeing these connections, if you were to look, you can take a guess at this. Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5-7. A lot of people would say that's written in wisdom literature with blessed is the blessed. It's like we're seeing these themes, and it's saying there's a right way to go, but conversely, there's, bad way to go. And if you look at Sermon on the Mount and you compare it with major themes in Proverbs, they both talk about a lot of the same things. The narrow path, keeping commandments, how do you use your wealth and material goods, God's wisdom and nature, sexual purity, guarding one's speech. And they both call us to, let your light shine, be active, don't just be idle, but look to the ant, work, these kind of things calling you to do. But there's a lot of parallels just between the Sermon on the Mount.
Like anger and murder should be on there too.
Right. And we could You could really draw even more so, and it's just interesting that a lot of these Jesus very practical.
Very practical. Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah.
So that was pretty good. I'm not going to develop this another word study to do, but you can look places like Ecclesiastes and read a lot about work and labor and toil and dust. See some good parallels in Genesis 2 and 3 and with the curse and all of that. But I really spent most of my time looking ahead at some of Paul's writings. We've kind of recently, I keep saying that, but Romans 8 was kind of a long time ago from Romans 14.
For forever ago. Romans 8, yeah.
And if you look at the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, and you look at the Greek word for hevel, and you look at that in the New Testament, there's only a handful of times it's used, but one of those times is Romans 8. I'm not going to read the entire passage, but it's talking about, creation is groaning. It's under the bondage of bondage to corruption. It uses the word, it's been subjected to futility. That's the word for hevel. There's groaning, pains of childbirth, and in the same manner, we groan inwardly, waiting for our adoption, the redemption of our bodies, where Paul kind of says, hevel's everywhere. And even in creation, we see it a lot.
Yeah. I was thinking about, if we had bantered on Elon Musk.
Oh, yeah.
It's like futility, ridiculousness, all the because I shared with you off camera that I thought it's probably ridiculous that he sends an email out on a Saturday night that's supposed to be responded to on Monday with the 5 things you're supposed to do,
So you got this email correct?
I did get it.
Was it from Elon Musk's?
No. It's from HR@opm.gov.
It'd be great if you're like, hey, Elon, I'm looking at Tesla. You just like having a conversation
It's from
with
the
them.
Office of Personnel Management, which
Gotcha.
is like this governing body over all federal workers. So I did get it. And then,
You were
as
telling me.
ridiculous as the email is, the response to the email I thought was ridiculous because if you can't name 5 things that you did in a week.
Yeah, you were telling me you got like 2 pretty easily, but the last 3 were tough to catch.
I got 2 easy, and I was like, man, I've got to think of 3 more. Now, I think people think of federal workers as kind of like this monolithic thing.
Yeah, it's like the
same.
for whatever reason, it's the go-to to be like, those, government employees.
Right. But we're not all the same. Anyways, I just thought all the responses, okay, that's a little bit ridiculous. The response to the ridiculousness was ridiculous. I was thinking of this. I was like, it's just vanity of vanity. It's just
added to
vanity.
that you mentioned on Sunday, the updated version, just even more. That's very, very updated. Throw in and then Elon Musk. Yeah, just kidding.
Yeah.
Another time, I don't think it's the exact same word, but we see vanity used a lot is 1 Corinthians 15, or really the word vain. Paul's really arguing that Christ hasn't been raised. Everything is hevel. There is vanity everywhere. It's like everything you're doing, you're in bad shape.
It puts us right back underneath the sun.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
There's nothing outside of this life, man.
Right.
Christians, it's not like...
and we're all... And it goes to the point that Ecclesiastes is making, because Paul says we are of most men to be pitied. Because we're not taking advantage of our fellow people. We could be, in theory, if this is all false, we could be, in theory, living a little bit better lives now, knowing, it doesn't matter if I screw someone over or not, because what's
the point?
What's the point? Yeah.
We're going through Desiring God with our college group, and John Piper is reading an interview by a monk or something. And this Catholic monk's basically like, hey, if God's not real, if atheism is supposed to be true, happy I live this way, I did what was right or whatever. And John Piper's like, that's not what Paul says. Paul's like, this was in vain.
Right.
Everything I do, the only reason it's not in vain is because it's in the Lord and that Christ has been risen, where it's like exactly what you're saying. It's like, man, if it's not, even if you didn't live a total life of debauchery, just living a life of yourself, that's not like, you're not drunk all the time and your life is miserable that way. You can take advantage of these things. Yeah. So that's Ecclesiastes, some connections I pointed out. Going to Job and Jesus, and Job, we talked a lot about this retribution principle. I think it's funny that, his disciples struggle with this very thing. John 9 says, and Jesus passed by, he saw a blind man from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned? This man or his parents that he was born blind? And Jesus answered, it wasn't that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. And so I think it's just human nature to be like, this person's struggling financially. Right. What did they do? You just jump to conclusions, which they may be true, but not necessarily.
No, that's good. That's really good.
And then this is always, I think, sometimes can be a little bit puzzling. This is kind of in the same vein where a lot of times Jesus doesn't talk about why someone suffered, but moves it to the cause in John 9. It's so that the works of God might be displayed. Also, in this one we'll talk about, some things happened as a warning. Luke 13, there it says in verse 1, there were some present at that very time who told Jesus about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. And Jesus answered them, do you think that these Galileans were worse sinners than all the other Galileans because they suffered in this way? No, I tell you, but unless you repent, you will all likewise perish. Or those 18 on whom the tower of Siloam fell and killed them, do you think that they were worse offenders than all the others who lived in Jerusalem? No, I tell you, but unless you repent, you will all likewise perish. Verses 3 and 5 are like the same. It's basically saying it's not necessary. It's not really that these people were so much worse than you.
Right.
It's not that they deserve this in a unique way.
Right.
Because we're all going to end up this
it.
way.
Yeah.
So I like that Jesus kind of hones in on this as well. And then when you're talking about Job, you gotta hit these verses where Job is struggling, and really part of his problem is, he says in chapter 9 that God's not a man like me. I can't answer him. We can't take each other to court. And part of that is because there is no mediator between us to lay his hand on both of us. That's Job just found himself there's no intercessor here that can be there. And then a few chapters later, he says these words like, I know that my Redeemer lives. And so we see some of this foreshadowing to Christ.
That's great.
In Job. So some New Testament connections, that's like, oh, that's cool. It's there, even though, like you're saying, there's not it's not like Jesus is quoting Job at length or Paul.
Right. No, but it still shows up. Yeah. The ideas and the thoughts.
Well, if I were to ask you, what are if you're thinking of preeminence of Christ, or what would you say would be like go-to text of thinking about Christ and divinity and all these like go-to texts?
Well, it's hard to say text, but really all of Hebrews is written to compare.
Like Hebrews?
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like the angels, Christ is better than angels. Christ is better than Moses. Christ is better than the law.
Yeah.
Christ is better than the Levitical priesthood. Christ is better than the sacrifices. And then, Ephesians 1, Colossians 1, those are really go-to. I'm sure there's other ones out there.
You nailed, so the three that I went to towards the end, we'll see how much time. We got a few minutes here.
Yeah.
But the way I closed it out is I looked at, what scriptures say when it comes to Christ as wisdom, looked at some prophecy in the Old Testament, and then looked at Christ's wisdom and his humanity and his divinity. So this is a little foreshadowing. I guess I shouldn't say it yet, but went to places like Colossians 1. I always think of John 1, Colossians 1, and Hebrews 1 just because they're all ones. I should have.
I should have put Ephesians in John 1. Clearly, John 1. I left that one out.
But I forgot. We'll get there later. I tried to make the same comparison that Clayton made between Adam and Solomon. I was reading this guy, Richard Belcher, and he was like, if you're a Jew reading about Solomon, just even like the verbiage and the words point back to Adam. Solomon is anointed at a river, Gihon, that was right there in Eden. Different river, same name. Adam was called to keep the garden. Solomon's got the same Hebrew word, to keep the charge of the Lord. Adam named all the animals. Solomon, very specifically, the author thinks important that his wisdom isn't just political or judgments,
right,
but it's about all these different trees and all these animals and reptiles and fish and birds. It's like, oh yeah, that's interesting that his wisdom was so broad. And that's why, in part, people of all nations came to hear some wisdom about animals, so he's drawing these parallels.
There are some non-canonical stories about Solomon being able to find the real flower amongst of fake flowers by letting go a bee, and the bee goes to the real flower. So,
that would have been, that's like one of those party tricks that's pretty amazing, where you're like, oh, and this is the real one. But that's pretty fascinating, because sometimes I think of Solomon just like, doing the I'm going to cut your baby in half trick, which is pretty wise. But I don't think of him as like being like, this is a hyssop tree, or I don't just knowing all of creation so well. Yeah. And then, they're both charged with obedience, reward, disobedience, consequence. And we know how the story goes. They both fail. But looking at scripture, I think
Christ is the better Adam and the better Solomon.
And then, that's where I went with it. Yeah. The connection.
That's great.
If we look at Isaiah 11, I'll just read a couple of these verses. I like the words that describe the Messiah. It talks about this person that the Spirit of the Lord shall rest on him. It says the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. His delight shall be the fear of the Lord. And you just keep reading, and it's like, this Messiah is going to have wisdom, understanding, counsel, knowledge, fear of the Lord. It's all like wrapped up with this kind of wisdom language, and what's going to rule the day is righteousness versus wickedness. Looked at Christ and his humanity. Luke 2, kind of very, very similar to Proverbs, where Proverbs 3 says, my son, don't forget my teaching. Let your heart keep my commandments. And if you do that, you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. Luke 2 says things like, Jesus increased in wisdom and stature, and he found favor with God and man. And
That's
so you're
good.
like, okay,
Yeah, that's good.
we're figuring this out. Jesus said that something greater than Solomon is here. People heard him and said, where did this man get this wisdom that, people saw that he was more than just a mere man. And then we get, I didn't even put Hebrews 1 on here because it was just so much text.
It's too much. Too much. Hebrews, because it's a whole book.
I should just put, I should put up Hebrews. The whole book of Hebrews. But what's so good about this is really these passages, they connect a lot of Christ with creation or creator.
Mm-hmm.
And we see wisdom, Proverbs 8, Job's 28,
Right.
all of it, it's like so wrapped up together.
Yeah, and I think both Colossians and Ephesians have some phrase that say something like everything is summed up in him. I think Colossians says he holds all things together, and Ephesians says everything is summed up in him, and it will be put as his footstool. I'd have to go back to see which one's which for sure. I could have those backed
you're
up.
right on with Colossians. I got it here. It says all things hold in him, all things hold together. Pretty great. Hebrews 1 would say like he upholds the universe by the word of his power.
Yeah.
You one in Ephesians, and then we talked about John 1 before. It maybe just says all things were made through him. It doesn't talk as much about maybe sustaining, but it talks about life and light. And I just love how part of that wisdom is just clearly creator, where you see that just spelled out. And then the place where I landed was 1 Corinthians 1. There's a lot of text, but Paul's going to great lengths to be like foolishness of wisdom of man, wisdom of God, compare and contrast. And his point is at the end, let the one who boasts in the Lord. You can't be like, I figured it out, I was smarter, I was stronger, whatever. Pretty good stuff.
Oh, that's all good. That's really good.
Wisdom books, and then
So you're saying that Solomon is no longer the wisest man.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, I know. Yeah, so someone says, "Who's the wisest man?"
Yeah.
Christ according to his human nature. There you have to make that.
There you go. Yeah.
That's good. And I ended with, I stole this from John Piper. I should send you this picture too. He was referencing an
So it's
app.
going to be Michael, Zach, Greg, John, right?
Yeah, we need mugs out of date. He looks at this, I don't know, he found it in a magazine or something, this Nature Valley ad, and it's like you could find a million of these ads. But the tagline in it is, you've never felt more alive, you've never felt more insignificant, and it's got like, you can barely see it, but two guys on top of like this mountain overlooking. And it's like one of those things that everyone knows, like you faced with creation, and it's like, man, you just feel so insignificant, and people like, people like love to surf or be on the ocean, or this universal thing.
Yeah.
People don't always see the right answer, but it's like, man, that just points to all of this wisdom. It's like, how can you understand the Grand Canyon? It's like beautiful in a way that you can't, I don't know, put words to it.
I experienced the most I've ever experienced that. We were at a planetarium.
Okay, yeah.
And it wasn't, maybe the person talking was a believer, but it wasn't a faith-based planetarium. And we were on a field trip, and it was at the space camp in Alabama.
Oh, yeah. Huntsville?
Yeah, Huntsville.
Yeah.
And like, she's just going through our solar system and like zoomed out. And it was just like crazy zoomed in. And it was just like all of creation on display. And I'm sitting there weeping. I'm just crying. I'm like,
it's like,
I'm a chaperone there with these other people from Northwood, and they're like, why is Mr. Mott crying? But it was just like that. It's like never more alive, never more insignificant in comparison to what God has created, and what He's done. So
and
it's great.
People go chasing that, and I don't know what the stat is, but you hear that kind of thing from like similar to what you're saying, astronauts, like when they like are looking at the Earth, and it's just like this thing that whether you know the right answer, something is like out there, and you see all these other religions, like people a lot of times like they don't get it right by any means, but it's like you can tell they're like oh, it's like in the universe, or it's like they know there's something bigger out there,
right?
And they're missing it, but it's something you really see, and so that to me, making that connection with Creator, that's a big part of wisdom. And then lastly, just want to talk about these wisdom books. They're very different, but they all teach us how to live life well. They all talk about the fear of the Lord. They show us, this is how the world should work, but things don't always happen that way. And part of that is we don't see the big picture anyway. We can see a slice of it. And so whether we think life is fair or not fair, we're called to live a certain way and do certain things in response to how life, how whatever hand we are dealt. And that's the good part about wisdom literature. It does exactly what we talk about. It just teaches you how to live, regardless of anything. So what's next?
What is next? Well, because we've had this series. I don't know. Maybe we talked about maybe having Jonathan White back on.
We should do it.
Maybe he can talk. I have some questions about some current political things. I'd like to get his thoughts on that. And then maybe he can talk to us about social media.
That'd be great.
I don't know. That's pretty good. I thought that was great what he shared. So maybe.
Yeah. We make no promises, but maybe. I think we should get him on the books. Yeah.
Just heard a podcast from Clay.
Oh yeah, I did not listen to this.
Melchizedek
and
how was
Michael.
That? It was really good. Did you have a chance to listen to it?
I have not listened to it. Yeah, I need to make it.
There are some very compelling arguments made. So I used to believe Methuselah was a Christophany because I just thought it was cool when I was younger. And then I was like, well, probably. Is there enough evidence to say that? But then, this podcast made some compelling arguments, I thought, for Methuselah, not Methuselah, Melchizedek to be a Christophany. And then also some compelling arguments that Michael the Archangel is a Christophany, the angel of the Lord.
Oh, wow. There are some traditions that think that way.
And the point was made the Jehovah's Witnesses think that Jesus is Michael, but they are lowering Jesus down to a mere creator. And we're not doing that. We're just saying Michael is another name of Jesus. He's still the uncreated creator. So just because Jehovah's Witnesses believe that, don't yet.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe those are some topics we could
that'd be good.
In the future.
Clay needs to get back on. This will be good.
Yeah. Maybe some children's songs.
Hey, there you go. Something to look forward to. Yeah, we got some good things in the works.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, so stay tuned.
I love it. Stay tuned. That's our take. Thanks for listening to Take Two. Find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube for those who want to watch our video cast.